There's a drive way back. It might be. It could be. It is. Holy cow. Welcome to another broadcast of Bricks Behind the Ivy.
Hey, Cub fans! Welcome to another episode of Bricks Behind the Ivy. I am your hostess, the mostest, Jeff Candid Cubs Rogowskis, and joining me today from the Brewer blogs on Twitter and from Brewer Fanatic, the sister site of Northside Baseball, Mr. two-time guest, I think our second-time guest on Bricks Behind the Ivy history, Mr. Jake Mckibbin, all the way from Ireland. Jake, how are you doing?
Hey Jeff, yeah, I'm not doing too bad. Bit of sport this weekend, and just nice to be outside before the cold, miserly rain sort of kicks in. And of course, always nice to talk baseball in what is a pretty starved of baseball sort of atmosphere at the moment. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, we have the Premier 12, I guess, if people are watching that, which I've been tuning in from time to time to see Matt Shaw.
Meanwhile, Matt Shaw
drives one to left field. Reyes back at the track, looking up. Goodbye, he's done it again. Matt Shaw can't be stopped. This game is tied at 1.
Well, from the looks of what we've seen from Matt Shaw on these 3 games, practically we can make the argument Matt Shaw won, Venezuela won, because it's been a one-man show on offense. 8 RBI.
Just because I need something to dream on as the Cubs continue to destroy my hopes on whether or not they're going to bid on top-end free agents that they clearly need. But yeah, I've been getting my baseball fix there, and of course, there's always baseball if you have MLB The Show, which is another thing that I like to dive into from time to time.
Yeah, of course. Sorry, go on ahead.
Yeah, since you've been here, there's obviously been a lot of changes. Like, we have our second rebrand since the original brand and the episode you were on, and we've obviously had to change a camera angle as I've set up a more permanent spot in the Candid Cub Cave, so you get like a fun new angle of all of the random toys I have down here. And we're approaching 3,000 downloads digitally. We've just surpassed 600 subscribers on YouTube. We've launched a Patreon, which I hope folks join today to get this episode 2 days early and some fun Bricks Behind the Ivy themed memorabilia each quarter. But yeah, what's been going on with you?
It's the sheer volume of stuff that you have behind you, Jeff. Like, honest to goodness, there's a man cave, and then they're like, you almost need like a bear cave and a cub cave. Like, it's almost like you got them both. Look at all that. What is Draco Dorian? Like, this is incredible.
Get those wonderful toys.
Yeah, this, I just said on my last episode, a lot of people like dream about what they're going to do like for a living, what they want to do with their lives. And ever since I've been collecting Cubs stuff, I've been dreaming about having a Wrigley themed space in my future house. So this is a dream manifested thanks to the approval of Mrs. Candid Cubs. And yeah, it's all my fandoms. Big Star Wars guy. Love Harry Potter. Like, really got into the Marvel movies and play a lot of video games. And then a majority of the stuff down here is Cubs. And yeah, this is 30 years of collecting in one spot.
I mean, I feel you in the Harry Potter at least, but like, first time I've ever confessed this out loud, but I did in fact read Harry Potter fan fiction at one point. So I'm with you in that fandom. Absolutely.
You're in a safe
Everything else.
So, before I talk about Harry Potter and all the characters and stuff I love for the rest of this podcast, let's shift to, you obviously have the perspective of a Brewers fan. You watch the Brewers, like people who listen to this podcast and myself watch the Cubs. And, I think we kind of stated in the last time you were here that I have felt like the Brewers have just had the Cubs number for just an alarming number of years now. A really just well set up infrastructure. Their minor league system seems to produce a lot of talent, and they did not miss a beat losing Craig Counsell, which I think a lot of Cubs fans had this idea that when Craig Counsell shifted allegiances, that we would have this new Brewers-like system with more money, and now we're just kind of we're still chasing the Brewers by several games, and it's starting to feel further and further away as their young talent is now kind of locked up, and they're leaning away from that challenging contract of Christian Yelich.
Yeah, I mean, I have a slightly different view in Yelich's contract than most, but that's just because I'm an optimist, I would have to say. But no, look, I think part of that as well is that there was sort of a theory Craig Counsell should have won Manager of the Year probably several times with the Brewers, but always someone who was, and it's always pre your expectations, who beat those by the most. Oh, your manager gets it, but it's always a team effort. I mean, although he's the face of it. One of the things I think the Brewers have a fantastic setup of is the team behind. And the likes of Chris Hook, I think, might be the best pitching coach in the league. You hear the stuff the players are talking about him. And luckily at Brewer Fanatic, we have Jack Stern on the inside getting all these sort of interviews with the players, and the way they speak of him and how he works is just incredible on the pitching side. We had Walker McKinnon, who's just been poached by the White Sox, so that might be a considerable loss because he was a big part in sort of the catching development side of things, and the game planning this year was a sort of step up. But amongst that whole sort of cohort of like game planning and just the little minute 0.5% here and there was really where they separated. And there was definitely that concern coming into the year that the Brewers would have lost that, like a real concern. Pat Murphy had a brief sort of sojourn in the role with San Diego, and the reports of him being very sort of old school in a way. But he actually talks. It's odd how it sort of switched around from him being a coach of Craig Counsell in high school, and he turned around and he's like, actually, I learned so much from that guy when I was his bench coach. And certainly strategically, there were times when you sort of question some of his decisions. Early on in the year, he sort of said the mantra of, it's win today, which sounds just another cliche, managers throw it out all the time. But he set out a stall really early. And it's fascinating to look back on this now, because I was wondering, it looked like he was overusing his bullpen early. William Contreras played the first 65 games of the year, no days off as a catcher, and some of these things may have impacted them down the road. But he basically reinforced, no, I'm here to win today. I actually I'll manage tomorrow. I'll worry about that then. But if we're in the chance of winning today, I'm throwing my best pieces out. I don't care what the situation is, whether it's 10th inning and we're up first. I don't care. Like, we're going all in. And that definitely permeated the club in a way that it really had everybody battling. And I don't like to use that lightly because, again, it's another one of those colloquialisms that people throw around. But you could see it in the likes of, especially with a young team. You feel like with a young team, a manager has the real sort of scope to mold them in terms of, here's what the big leagues is and here's why it's different to everything you've had before. And your players who weren't maybe the most attractive maybe to watch in some ways, like the Sal Freliks, Bryce Terang, even Joey Ortiz. And there's like defensively brilliant, and they never switched off. Everything was, I'm battling for every inch and scrap that I can get here. And I think that was one of the things that played a big part in the Brewers' success this year. Even though there definitely were tactical sort of maybe errors or blunders, or maybe that's just from my perspective. Obviously, everybody looks at it differently, but, pinch hit situations. He loved Elvis Peguero for a while as his fireman when people were on base, despite Elvis Peguero conceding runs at an alarming. He had a habit of walking the first hitter nearly every time he came in. So you bring him in a bases loaded situation, and then he walks a batter in, and you're like, was that the smart decision there? But little things like that, where you sort of see like strategically, you're like, what is going on? But because of how good he was in terms of the squad and the unity within the squad and the leaders they already have there, that definitely was a main reason of the success this year, because it certainly wasn't big name players. It definitely wasn't that.
Yeah, I think the Brewers do a lot with a little, and they've done that for a number of years here. And, obviously like swinging the fence for Christian Yelich when they got him, like those opportunities when they present themselves, like they have to strike strategically. Like they play that fringe game a little bit, like really well. And I think that was something, and I kind of want to get your opinion before, I guess we'll talk about when we talk about Craig Counsell. Let's focus on Pat Murphy, Manager of the Year, which I felt there was an intense irony that in his first year as manager, he won that award, while Craig Counsell, who did so well with that club, like came in second, like almost every year. He was a manager in Milwaukee, and like he goes to the Cubs and they finally give it to Pat Murphy. And but yeah, I think, two things that really stuck out about the Brewers to me was they had a lot of team speed and very solid defense. And I think that their speed created more runs than because they had, I think, the highest hit rate on ground balls in baseball because they were able to run out a lot of base hits. And they also had an extremely good outfield once, Jackson Chourio got settled and got some good, range from those players. And you got the Platinum Glove Award winner in Bryce Trang, who, just is an absolute defensive stud. And, I think there's some Cub fans who would argue that Nico shouldn't deserve to lose his Gold Glove there. But, I mean, Bryce Trang is such a fun defensive player to watch. Every time the Cubs would play the Brewers, I think there were felt like 4 or 5 hits a series that guy took away just because of his able to move laterally as well as he does. But yeah, I think it's a good moment to shift to Craig Counsell and the Cubs and the perspective of what you saw. Obviously, the Brewers destroyed the Cubs. They're not even in the same stratosphere in the division this year. And I think going into this season, we had really anticipated the division to potentially be close because we felt that all of the teams were doing different things, but no one chose to do anything super well. They all had solid off seasons. They all had clear situations where they could have taken a different path to really solidify the roster, and none of them did. And the Brewers had to do what they do best, and they got rid of Woodruff, they got rid of Burns, and I really thought they would drop off, and they didn't, and they suffered all those injuries with pitching and just didn't fall off, didn't miss a beat, didn't have Devin Williams for a good chunk of the year, and still didn't miss a beat. It's just unbelievable from my perspective, just the next man up philosophy and how good they are at that. But for the Cubs at the end of the year, and I'll probably add that clip right here, take a break for it to be added.
To get better, man. The team we're chasing is 10 games ahead of us. You got to get better, and we should try to be building 90-win teams here. I mean, that's what you have to do to that's a playoff standard. I mean, that's what you got to get to be safely in the playoffs, right? And safely in the tournament. So
that the Brewers were just well ahead of the Cubs in every way. And he had cited the games, the distance between them and the Brewers, and just how he felt the teams played. But yeah, at the end of the day, as a Brewers fan, did you feel that the Cubs were a class below where the Brewers are? Or do you feel that the Cubs are closer to the Brewers than Cub fans may think? What's your perspective?
Oh God, no. Sorry, Dev. I didn't feel that actually for most of the year. Well, I guess I would take it two ways. So in the direct matchups, it definitely didn't feel like that. It felt like, all the games were coming down. They were real sort of nail-biting affairs where it seemed like one team would maybe get a bit of a blowout, the other one would, and then the remaining game would always be a one-run affair in a 12th inning. And it seemed like there was a streak with the Cubs starting pitching was some ridiculous inning stretch of just not conceding a run. It's just to start the season where you're looking at it and you're like, how on earth have the Brewers won 3 out of the 5 games so far? It was bonkers. I think in general, though, looking at the Cubs, I've actually found it kind of tough to analyze in some ways because of the effects that the change and almost the effects of Wrigley seem to have this year. The wind was blowing in a lot, which meant that actually pitchers like Imanaga probably looked slightly better than they actually were performing. There's a lot of fly balls just stopping short. And then the knock-on effect is also, in terms of hitting, the likes of, Cody Bellinger and Nico and people like that who rely very much on that pull side power. Maybe not Cody so much, actually it was more right-handers at the pull side, wasn't it? Where it was really blowing in. And the ball just died. And I think that made it sort of really tough to analyze in some ways. I do think there's a solid group of hitters, and maybe there was one thing that always kills an offense is a black hole. And that was maybe where even the likes of Christopher Morel for Paredes might help quite a bit next year because it's not a black hole. You don't probably want them hitting third in your lineup, but if you have that guy hitting 6th or 7th, that really sort of lengthens you out a wee bit. And then if you have another prospect coming through, you're at least getting competent at bats, where there were times last year where you just got the 3 straight hitters and you're like, what's the point of them even being there at times? And then pitching wise, I think the other thing was Justin Steele was out for a lot of last year. And sometimes I feel, I see some of Cubs Twitter because obviously I follow you guys. I'm really sort of like the stuff. I do tune into the odd episode every now and then. Bit of a guilty pleasure, but from the dark side. But I do find that there's a lack of a connection with Justin Steele sometimes. Where I look at him and I look how he performs against the Brewers, and I'm like, that guy's an ace. Like, he has 3 pitches that basically, he has the 4-seam cutter and the slider / sweeper. Is it just cutter, slider, sweeper? By the way, does each one move slightly further away? And you can't time him up. Like, he's when he's not just coming off the IL, and you should excuse anybody for the first 2-3 starts or for a long-term absence. Like, he was unbelievable. And I think having a bona fide ace to start next season, fingers crossed if he can stay healthy, is going to be a big, big boost for you guys. But I certainly don't feel like it's miles apart. I do think there's room. The Brewers probably slightly overperformed this year, and we certainly got, we have full season of Jackson Churio coming through next year, which is going to be, brilliant to see. But yeah, I think he had a 900 OPS in the last 4 seasons, but it only ended up just below 800 because he was like sub 550 for the first 2 months. Well, a bit like Pete Armstrong for you guys, absolutely sucked for a while, and then all of a sudden it just clicks a wee bit. But I think there's definitely excitement to have around the Cubs, certainly with players like that and young players coming through. You see Shaw in the Premier 12, is certainly an exciting talent, and maybe he won't be there to start next season, but you'd maybe hope by sort of June time you have that second base, third base option, and then maybe gives you the tradable asset to get who you need maybe at the deadline with likes of Nico or Paredes if you do choose to move him for arbitration sort of stuff. Because obviously he's going to get more expensive as the years go in. So I certainly wouldn't be too down, though. You do feel like there's an injection of one thing you would say about the Birds that they do have really well, and Christian Yelich has been a big part of this, is that clubhouse culture. People come in and they just feel like relaxed. There's that energy of we're here, we work, this is how we do things, and people don't come in and challenge it. They come in and they join it, and they generally perform better as a result. There's a real cohesion there, and part of that comes from like the energy and excitement that the players have about coming to the ballpark. And I'm sure, I mean this in degrees, because I'm guessing the majority of players turn up and they're excited about the career they have. But sometimes after a while, it sort of becomes more normalized in some ways. But you see players like a Sal Frelick, who again isn't that amazing, but that man would run through 5 brick walls to have a 10% chance of making a catch, like no fear. And Pete Armstrong, I could see sort of from the Cubs Twitter, like the excitement that he sort of generated with how he moved the stolen bases, and it didn't even matter if he hit consistently. He had enough pop to sort of carry himself, and when he was on base, you felt the hairs in the back of your neck go. And I feel like even much as Juan Soto makes a massive difference, selling out for one big player can be hit or miss at times. Well, though he's probably the safest bet you can have in a long-term contract. But even if you can get somebody in who just has that little bit of electricity and is like that clubhouse presence to add to, maybe Bellinger's not quite the same leader as you think, or it just needs that old experienced head who says, no, this is how we play ball. Like, let's go have some fun, and this is how we're going to do it, and drags the clubhouse together a little bit. I feel like someone like that, and all of a sudden you'll see all the close losses, the bullpen blow-ups, and there was like a 2-month span where the clubhouse just got away, and it wasn't the bullpen underperformed, but it's not just on that. It was like the whole clubhouse just was like, where's our next win coming from? Because the Brewers never lost 4 games in a row all year. And that's sort of the difference of whatever's happened yesterday. I'm competing and I'm going hard today. And I feel like just one clubhouse presence and you'll see how it lifts everybody else up. And I think that'll translate to 3, 4, 5 wins even probably towards the end of the year.
Yeah, it's tough. Like, you look at the Cubs, and like, not to beat this ad nauseum like we have in post hoc of 2024, like they had 30 blown saves, and you convert 6 of those, and we're having a completely different conversation. They're at minimum a wild card team, which was the goal was just to get back in the tournament, because once you get in, you never know what's going to happen. Baseball's weird. The short series and short-ish division series, and yeah, I feel like the Cubs' strength going into next year really could be rotation depth. I think that we've entered a weird era of obviously like starters, openers, and like heavy bullpen play, and like that works, I think, to a certain point in the playoffs. But at some point, I think if you're still, it does bug me in a World Series game when I see an opener, because I just don't think that's how we were designed to watch the game. And I understand, like, with certain hitters and stuff, like limiting the number of times they're going to see a certain guy and things like that. I know the statistics are there, but being able to have like 4 horses, and you don't really need to lean on like your weapons every night because your horses are able to put 6-7 innings together. Yes. Like, I feel like there's a huge advantage of bullpen management of being able to throw guys out that often. So
we saw that this year. Like we saw how there was a stat that went out that when, like, especially the 7-game series, once a member of the bullpen had appeared like a third time in that series, they got absolutely crushed. Whereas you saw, like, that was, the Mets did not have a good rotation, but yet somehow they managed to have them going deep into games, and that was a main reason for them actually going as far as they did. Tariq Skubal was brilliant for the Tigers, and they obviously used an opener a fair bit, but they still got more depth once the starter came in than you expected. Whereas you saw like Devin Williams and Emmanuel Clase getting absolutely pounded, and you're like, hang on, these guys don't give up home runs at any point. What is going on here? So, no, I think you're right. I actually think that maybe the game, that's one of those things where the game might actually turn in the playoffs, where it's advantageous to have those starters going deep, once facing an order 3 times and having the stuff to do it, rather than being a 2-pitch pitcher and facing a lineup 3 times in 3 days. That, I don't think that's going to end well for people.
It's a controversial opinion anymore, but the Chicago Cubs won the 2016 World Series because the Indians were 1 starter short, and they deployed that bullpen far too often. And they had reason to do so because they went up 3-1. But then, as you said, the Cubs saw Corey Kluber for a 3rd time in Game 7, and he went from the first game he struck out 9. The next time he pitched, I believe he struck out 5. In his last start, he struck out no one because they had adjusted to his game planning. And then they saw all of that. Brian Shaw, I can't think of their closer's name right now. It was Andrew Miller, was deployed for multiple innings. But at that point, they had seen them every win that Cleveland had gotten. And if they had one more starter and had deployed those guys, maybe 1 appearance less, the Cubs lose that World Series. Like, I'm 100% certain of that. Like, that's, and like, but Trevor Bauer got his fingers cut up by a drone, and they had a bunch of rotation.
Oh no!
Yeah, exactly. Trevor Bauer, just a gentleman. We're all really sad. Not. But yeah, just if they had one more pitcher, if they started one more guy, got a little bit of length out of him, like that alters the history, and we're still talking about the number of years since the Cubs won the World Series. But thankfully, I have a bunch of World Series memorabilia down here, and they didn't have another guy to throw out there. But yeah, I think folks are probably pretty tired at times of how often I bring up Juan Soto and you bring up Juan Soto. But if you're a little tired, why not get some Yaggy Road Roasting Company coffee? They were started by 3 college friends of Valparaiso University. Yaggy Road Roasting Company is a specialty boutique coffee roaster centered on ethically sourcing and meticulously roasting some of the most special coffees in the world. A lot of life's most special moments happen over coffee, which is why Yaggy Road ensures that the coffee in your mug is as special as the moment you are experiencing. Use the link in this podcast to order yours today. And with that sloppy ad transition, let's talk differences that you might have noticed with Pat Murphy versus Craig Counsell. And I've got some stats that I looked at to see Craig Counsell Chicago versus Craig Counsell Milwaukee, and see if there was anything different, anything sizably different in his behavior versus what he was doing historically. And some of them to me make sense based on like how the offense performed, because we're talking 1 year data versus 9 years of data in Milwaukee. Craig Counsell stole second at a 1.5 7% higher rate than he had when he was in Milwaukee, in average. So he's at 9.7% steal rate for second this year versus 8% historically in Milwaukee. His sack bunt rate was the highest of his career since his first year as a manager at 1.1%, which based towards the end of the parts of the year when the bottom of the lineup was doing nothing and they were trying to get more runs across because the Cubs at times struggled to score runs. That did not surprise me either, that he was bunting more than he ever has. Intentional walks still doesn't really do it. He had only 7. He only had 209 in 9 years at Milwaukee, so around the same pace. Nothing too egregious. Early in his career, he intentionally walked people a lot, and then he just kind of stopped doing it in 2020. Obviously, shortened season, he only did it once, but he only got the double digits once in intentional walks since 2020. So that's super interesting. And yeah, substitutions per game. This also did not surprise me. He substituted players way more often in Milwaukee, and I think that I know there's a lot of discussion this offseason about how the Cubs use their bench, and meaning they didn't. They had like Patrick Wisdom, at times they had Nick Madrigal, they had Mike Tauchman. Like, guys were either playing every day or they were sitting and warming that bench. And I feel like that there needs to be, I know the Cubs are a bigger market club, and I'm going to put that in quotations depending on how they're behaving, but they have a lot of players on that team that seem to require or expect to play every day. And I think like in the marathon of a season, they really need to change that narrative and have some more flexibility, which is why I think maybe like we're hearing some of the trade rumors even after he accepted like Cody Bellinger. I think they're trying to get like some of these kids like mixed into the fold, like Matt Shaw, maybe Kevin Alcantara, Owen Casey, or maybe we're still going to trade them still very early in the offseason. But when you have a bench player that's playing maybe once every 2 weeks, which felt like what was going on with Counsell, like they're not coming in super fresh. They're not very valuable. You're wasting several spots on your major league roster if you're not using those guys in some sort of capacity. But like Dansby Swanson is one of those guys who, like, unless his arm is falling off, and even then he's not coming off the field. Nico Horner's defensive value at second base is too high. Also, he played with like a absolutely destroyed wrist most of the season. He had to get surgery. Michael Busch, he didn't really have any other options at first base. You're not sitting Seiya or Ian Happ if they're healthy. Cody Bellinger's going to get in that mix. And really a catcher, the only reasonable option they had was Miguel Amaya. So that left third base as the option to mix guys in. Or like Milwaukee's entire roster is designed on matchups and all these things because they have to hit those margins because they're not a big market club. Like maybe they have like Joey Ortiz playing versus lefties, but or a glove guy. Versus when they have one of their better or higher rate ground ball pitchers, they want the glove guy out there. I feel like Counsell probably was way more used to that ability of like being able to play matchups, and he inherited a roster that was like very stagnant. So I'm interested to see now that we're a year in, like if he has some influence, and we're going to see some, like Mike Tauchman just got DFA'd, Patrick Wisdom got DFA'd, Nick Madrigal got DFA'd. Like that was our entire bench. So clearly they've identified this as an issue, and hopefully we'll change things going forward. But yeah, are there anything like what I said that surprises you about Counsell's tendencies, and was there anything in Patrick Murphy's tendencies that seem more Counsell-ish, or like were there things that you think he did better or worse than Counsell?
I mean, the stolen bases doesn't surprise me too much because just the larger bases in general, you're sort of seeing a lot more attempts sort of going through. Again, intentional walks, since I've been a fan, and I only started my baseball love probably in 2019 when I actually was in Milwaukee to see some cousins. So, since I've known him, I haven't really seen many intentional walks. So, again, not too much of a surprise. The use of the bench, I think it depends. It was sometimes a frustration of maybe your sort of casual fan in Milwaukee, how often he would change it. And I think it's one of those things that all depends on the results and also the quality of the bench. So like this year, for instance, under Murphy, Andrew Monasterio played probably once every 2 weeks. And even then it was just the occasional pinch hit. And it's because you're turning around saying, actually, you're not that great defensively. And he did struggle defensively when he was in, but he was happy in that role of just the occasional I'm here as cover sort of role. Wisdom surprised me a little bit because he was actually someone I was thinking Milwaukee might have actually targeted this summer, given or this offseason, given there's still occasional struggles with lefties. And that dude, you can put him in a pinch hit against the lefty, and I'm thinking that would be the sort of situation where I'd be looking for someone like him to come in. Tauchman got hot for a bit. Nick Madrigal, you probably wouldn't want in under any circumstances, because no matter, even if Nico Horner has 2 broken wrists, he's probably still producing slightly more than Nick Madrigal. So no offense, Nick Madrigal, you are a far better athlete than I would ever be. Just at this level, you look at it and you look at the results. So I think it's probably more down to the quality of the bench. As you say, you can see them taking steps to address that. It's certainly something in Milwaukee he did a lot, where he almost had a lefty lineup and a righty lineup. The problem was that the right-handers he started against lefties had reverse platoon splits, so they actually only hit righties anyway. Hence, Milwaukee just couldn't hit left-handers. But no, I think it's probably situation-based, and he's very, Craig Counsell's. It's interesting how the way he comes across in the media, for instance, is very dour, and you look at him and you hear him speak, and you're probably couldn't be less motivated listening to him if you actually tried. But you hear players speak about him, and because he used to be a player, they feel he's very good at translating the fact that he's on their side. The likes of Colton Wong and Brandon Woodruff and multiple other people have said about how they would honestly run through walls for that guy. How he, even in the COVID season, he said, look, baseball's important, but your family comes first. I'm putting in this protocol, that protocol. I want you to stay safe. Woodruff his wife was pregnant at the time. Obviously a bit of a concern given the lack of knowledge we had about COVID at the time. So there were things like that were real worries. And the way he dealt with that and dealt with the clubhouse, he's absolutely brilliant at that. And then he's very in tune as to when to make decisions. Even in hindsight, Jesse Winker was brought in a playoff situation, which fond memories of him in the playoffs this year and last, to be honest, at this point. But so Counsell was criticised heavily for it, but you could also see that his bat speed was back, and you could see why he was put in and the logic behind putting someone with a high on base when you have a 2-run deficit. Do you know what I mean? So there was always logic trailing. You could understand why he was making decisions, and I think certainly the bench, being the quality that it was, played a pretty big impact on that. And you'd be interesting going forward. Obviously catcher was a big black hole for you guys last year. And you need 2 catchers. Like you can't go without it. You need someone else in there every now and then. And it would be a market. I don't think that there's no big catchers in the free agent market this year, are there?
Some rumors of some trade. I know the Cubs, like some fans, had tied them potentially, if we were chasing Max Fried, into Travis d'Arnaud, who obviously has already signed with the Angels. And then, there's still Carson Kelly out there, which is another Cub target based on his solid reputation of receiving skills. It's very interesting just following his career. At one point, he was the heir apparent to Yadier Molina, and obviously he was traded out of St. Louis. And he's had a decent career, but being the heir to Yadier Molina is a little bit harder to do than I think they anticipated as when they tried to bring Wilson Contreras on board in St. Louis. I think it's interesting just looking at 23 versus 24 for the Brewers. I know that when we had talked earlier in the year, you had said that you felt they were going to slug a little bit better than they had in the past, and that was going to be a big key to how good their offense was, because they brought in some guys to hit the ball, which is obviously half of the game. And they hit more home runs this year. Their slugging percentage as a team was up about 20 points, and that's a pretty big jump. OPS was up 25 points. Like they really took a step, and they had a lot of young guys in there and missed Counsell, or not Counsell, sorry, Yelich for an extended period of time. Yeah. Like that's and the thing that's really interesting is like their walk rate and their strikeout rate are nearly identical in the 2 seasons. So like it's interesting to me. I just feel like the Brewers put the ball in play a lot. They don't they strike out at a decent clip, but not anything egregious. But I feel like when we play the Brewers, it's like constant on base, constant speed. I think there are two teams in the Central that I think I fear when men get on base, and it's the Brewers and the Reds. They both play to a rate of speed in the game that requires better catching. And I really was concerned as the year went on, even like when the Cubs theoretically had a chance of getting into the playoffs. Miguel Amaya's receiving skills are fine. His pop time's not great. He doesn't control the running game very well. I know he's kind of recently off of Tommy John for that arm. So maybe this offseason a program increases his ability to throw out base runners. But in this division, the Cubs need to find a defensive catcher that can control the run game, because you will not survive versus the Brewers or the Reds, especially now that, I have gained respect for Pat Murphy, not that I didn't have respect for him. And, Tito is back in Cincinnati, and he manages the game super well. So there's some pretty high power managers in this division, and with the Cardinals taking a step back, there's a real opportunity, for these three teams to really emerge as the top contenders, potentially based on certain moves for the Cubs. I think at this moment, I would say the Brewers and the Reds are better set up for the top of the division, because they have a little bit more of, I would say, the prove-it factor on their team, where the Cubs really need to kind of get out of whatever rut they're in, this back-to-back seasons of exactly 83 wins. And I think I do want to kind of go back to this point. I thought it was super interesting that you had mentioned that the Cubs need a vet for the clubhouse, and then your comment that I think a lot of Cub fans are going to relate to. He's not an interesting, riled up interviewer, Craig Counsell. He's very stoic's not the word I want to use, but he's not instilling this confidence of having everybody behind his back. But like you said, the players very much playing for him. And we talked to Cole Wright in an episode we just had. I'll drop a link in the video. Had mentioned that the players loved him, and he felt like it was a little overblown, about fans wanting Craig Counsell to go out there and get ejected, and he's having a steady Eddie or a consistent experience from a manager is super valuable for a lot of players. They prefer to know what they're getting and how they're going to get it. And I agree. I think the Craig Counsell's experience in the front office and his experience as a player and his experience as a manager probably helps him translate a lot of baseball concepts to players that might not be listening to the statistic guys or the nerds in the front office as often, because he's done it from all perspectives. He's going to be able to play, and all manager's job is really all about fostering communication, and I'm thinking that is his strength. But losing David Ross as a manager, I think you lose a little bit of that, that hard ass, I don't know, the mentality, because David Ross is a red ass guy. He was the entire time he played, no bullshit, nothing got by Rossi. Play the game the right way, play the game hard. Really, I thought he was a solid manager. I get seeing the opportunity of Craig Counsell and going and pouncing on that. I got it, but I didn't have any issues going into 2024. If Dave Rossi was still at the helm, I thought he had earned the opportunity, given he had finally gotten a team that was a little more competitive. But I think it's very interesting just hearing the perspective from the other side of town, and I think hopefully fans find this episode kind of comforting that our, I would say, direct rival at this point. I think this has turned into a pretty solid rivalry. Does not feel like we are leaps and bounds away from making the games interesting. And I didn't feel that way when they played head to head. It's just finding a few more wins and not collapsing in May for the third year in a row, and having to dig out of that hole in July is really going to make a huge difference.
Completely. That's where it'll come down to. If you can mitigate those sort of losing months, so it's a losing month is 12 and 15 rather than 9 and 18, 9 and 19. There's such a difference there. And as you said, dragging yourself out of that as a player, you feel like you're out of it. There's that stuff around the trade deadline. Are we trading? Are we selling? What's going on here? And no, you're right on Counsell. You'd see Facebook underneath them with the Brewers, and they would be like, "Oh, Counsell does it again," stuff like that sort of going on. But the guy knows what he's doing. He's been in the front office, and he turns around, he makes his decisions based on not just what's good in that game, but how to get the most of his players out of the full season. He's very good at managing workloads, and he's very good at merging sort of everything in terms of decisions, and he's very honest with the players. And I think they very much respect that. So I certainly wouldn't be looking at him as weakness. He's definitely a strength. And maybe it's more, as I said, with the Brewers stuff, the background staff. And I think he poached Quentin Berry as I actually wouldn't be surprised if Hobie Milner ends up on the Cubs or the Mets. We have a recent history of certain Brewers bullpen guys ending up either with Stearns or with Counsell of late. So if you get him, wouldn't be surprised either. So I think there's definite upsides, and I really don't think the Cubs, 83 wins, you're still a plus 500 team. You're looking for an edge here or there in a few games, and a bit more luck, and you're a 90 win team. I don't think it's as far off as you think, but you can't let losing become sort of the habit of, well, we're never actually competing. So it's definitely going to be a big season for the Cubs, and a big start is going to be really, really vital for them this year, I think.
Agreed. And for Cubs fans of note, the Cubs were 10-18 in May in 2023 and in 2024. Both times that was the sinking month. 8 games under 500 in a month is really tough to recover from. And they proved that twice, that it was really tough to recover from. So really it's the early, they say that you can't lose a season in April. The Cubs have been losing seasons in May. So it's and Mayflowers bring bullpen mishaps and injuries for the Cubs. So hopefully they can mitigate that in 2025. So thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. Obviously, we're going to have you back as things get settled. We'll do our NL Central preview roundtable again and talk about final moves, roster projections, and guessing where teams are going to be over-under-wise, record-wise. So we'll be in touch, obviously. Just to plug some stuff that you've been doing for Brewers Fanatic, anything you've got, in the pot that's coming out soon, or where people can find you on the different social media.
So I'm over on Twitter as the Brewers blogs, and I'm on Blue Skies, just Jake McKibbin. And yeah, I've got a couple of things I'm sort of thinking about right at the moment. We did if you were the GM for the day, and I got far too in depth and actually didn't go over the 20 decisions I'd make and went through three in quite a lot of depth. Looked at a couple of Dodgers prospects actually that I really quite liked. So really enjoyed that one, and debating it, looking sort of around like you said, the bench sort of stuff for Milwaukee in the near future. So looking forward to that, and then a little bit of action.
Don't worry, I've got my handy
sort of deep
calculator
diving really, and a few sort of pitching sort of standouts, walking turn around here and there, just literally becoming a statistical nerd. So that's sort of the future for me.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a statistical nerd my whole life, majored in math, and these classes are not for show. They are legitimate nerdery. So I appreciate that. And once again, thank you so much. Just real quickly, want to plug Wrigleyville Sports, the most loyal and awesome sponsor in the history of the universe. Wrigleyville Sports is located adjacent to Wrigley Field, customizing jerseys in record time so that you can order them and wear them to the ball game. I'm sure they're going to have some of that Blackhawk stuff for the Winter Classic, so go check it out. Looking to save some money on those things? Use Bricks Behind the Ivy's code IVY10, that's IVY10 at checkout, and I'll give you 10% off of your cart. So check that out today, and thank you, Wrigleyville Sports, for continuing to be a sponsor. And if you are looking to support Bricks Behind the Ivy, make sure you come on to Patreon. Yes, Patreon is our new way of trying to generate additional revenue for ads and such so that we can build the best Cubs community for Cub fans by Cub fans, which is our tagline for Bricks Behind the Ivy. And I just want to give a shout out to some of our current paid members. As promised, we have Mike Waller of the Cubs PS Plus podcast. We have Sun Ranto, Mr. Danny Rocket from the Sun Ranto Show, great Cubs program, and Mr. Matt Bowman, who is also in Europe. He is from the UK, and he found Bricks Behind the Ivy as a UK Cubs fan. So we have worldwide reach over here at Bricks Behind the Ivy. Thank you so much for your support. join today and experience some of the additional perks of being a member, including all the way up to in our top tier, which is referred to as the Ivy League. Yes, I know, it sounds very fancy. $10 a month. Each quarter, you will get a t-shirt, polo shirt, or sweatshirt that is either special themed or from our merchandise store, and a coffee mug or cup to commemorate your status as an Ivy League member. Memberships start as $1, and it gets you access to private chat groups, episodes 2 days early on YouTube and on podcast platforms, and you get to talk to me directly. So content ideas, all those things, and you get this lovely shout out. So join that today. Thank you so much, Mr. Brewer Blogs himself, Jake Mckibbin, for coming on. Until next time, thank you for listening to Bricks Behind the Ivy, and go Cubs.